Welcome to the Kirkpatrick podcast, bridging traditions and trends in learning and performance evaluation. Whether you're a seasoned learning professional or just starting out, join us as we dive into the Kirkpatrick model like never before. Through stories and insights, we are fusing time-honored methods with cutting-edge innovations to help you navigate the ever-evolving world of learning and performance evaluation. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kirkpatrick podcast. It's Jim and Vanessa, and we are so excited to have Dr. Anna Lissitz on our podcast today, talking all about survey design. This is a big topic, one that we get lots of questions about. How do I design a good, very sound survey? And that's what we're going to be diving into today. And we are so excited that Dr. Lissitz also is going to be at our summit in June to be sharing all of this knowledge as well. Dr. Anna Lissitz holds a PhD in measurement, statistics, and evaluation from the College of Education at the University of Maryland, College Park. Anna has held positions in the area of program evaluation in K-12 public school districts, learning design and assessment in higher education, and e-learning design for workforce development organizations. Anna provides psychometrics consulting for a variety of training and education-related organizations. She's a full-time professor of data analytics at McDaniel College in Westminster, Maryland. Hey, Anna, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have you. You know, we've met each other, throughout my time here at Kirkpatrick. Anna has reviewed our surveys and given us feedback, and really just helped us ensure that we are on the right path, because I'm not going to lie, I am not a psychometrician. That is not in my wheelhouse, but I'm glad to have found someone like you to support us. So we heard a little bit about your background and your bio, but can you tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and where that passion came from and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I think right out of graduate school, some of my first jobs was working in the school district doing program evaluations. And back then, I kind of follow the same pattern. We survey students, we survey parents, we survey teachers, administrators, pull it all together in a report. And often those reports, the program evaluation reports, would sit on the shelf in someone's office. They can check the box and say, yep, we did this evaluation. It's there. Federal government can keep funding our program. So that was a little, kind of my first introduction to the field. And I thought, well, this isn't right. Like I'm getting all of this input, all this feedback. We should actually use it for what we say we're using it for, which is program improvements and decision making. So I really worked those early years, trying to figure out how can this be effective? How can this be useful? And I obviously came across the Kirkpatrick evaluation model a lot. And it was really helpful to kind of learn, okay, how can you talk to your stakeholders? What kind of information do they need, to make this, to drive decisions using their data, using this data. So it's kind of, then that was, only like 25 years ago. So I've had a little bit of time to work on it.
So you've seen all kinds of surveys, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes. I also, I got into, in the higher education field, I got into doing what's called outcomes assessment, which measuring programs' performances on their outcomes and objectives. So again, a lot of survey research there, surveying students, surveying teachers, administrators, that sort of thing. I've also done quite a bit of work for a few different accreditation agencies. And for accreditation, it's almost always required that they survey their stakeholders, gather input and feedback, and that they show that they're making decisions based on this data. I think that's kind of one of in outcomes assessment, they always say, we want to close the loop. So closing the loop is, you gather the data, you draw inferences, you make conclusions, recommendations, but then you really need to come back and follow up. Did those decisions have any impact? What were the results of those actions? So it's this kind of continuous cycle. So, which obviously I could talk about it forever.
But Jim, I think you and I will both agree with this, I hope. That's really, that closing the loop is definitely one of the missing pieces. And probably why, we talk a lot about, well, why are people not completing surveys? And so the first question that we'll ask customers is, well, what are you doing with the data that you're collecting? Are you actually making change? And if you are making change, are you sharing those changes? Hey, because of your feedback that you provided, here are the changes that we're making on our end. If people don't know what is happening, they're going to just assume that data is going into some sort of repository, into an abyss, that nothing is ever going to come of it. And they are not going to be as willing to give up some of their time to provide that insight and feedback.
You remember that, Vanessa, when we were at the Qualtrics
conference? The roundtable. Mm-hmm,
and they said, the guy that was a PhD in this, just like Anna is, said, it is not survey fatigue. People are just tired of it. They're tired of not knowing that it's doing any good or not. Of course, right. They maybe are surveyed beyond beyond reason at times too. But and I have a question. First of all, I'm a little nervous around you, and excited both. I'm a little nervous because I have a PhD, and I talk a lot about surveys, but I do not have the expertise that you do, and that's the excitement part that I will get to now. Here's some things that I can learn, and then in June, I want to continue the conversation. But would you mind telling us, you started already where you said 25 years ago, people were just checking the box and compliance. We did the surveys. We're not really using it. What is the current state of evaluation? How much has that changed in those years to the current time?
It probably depends on the industry or the field that you're talking about. I think with online, with how easy it is to survey someone these days, like you kind of mentioned, survey fatigue, not really seeing where are the results going and how are they being used. I think there can certainly be some of that skepticism, like, oh, why should I bother to fill this out? Nobody's really going to look at it anyway. So, but I do also think with technology and all these new tools that have gotten a lot better and more efficient at collecting data and feedback from our respondents. The ability to survey a room while you're in the room with those people, like live polling and gathering that formative input and feedback can be really effective if you use it, right? So, I've been at, workshops and trainings where we collect kind of this live data in the middle of the training, and we can adjust kind of on the fly. Folks are struggling. They have questions about this. Let's adjust the training so we focus more on this topic than that topic, So I think kind of the innovations like that are really exciting right now.
Yeah. You use the words, not just data. You're not just an analytics person. I heard you say earlier on about what information do we need. So I have a feeling that the way that you think and the way that you process this, that surveys are not the sufficient in and of themselves, because we hear so many people saying we send a 30, 60, 90-day survey for our level 3, and that is the information that we use to make major decisions on. And I just cringe when they wait 60 or 90 days to even check to see what's going on in the field. So I'm not an expert in survey building, but I sure believe I'm an expert saying surveys do not give you enough data in order to draw major conclusions and make decisions. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think also when I use the word data, I'm not just talking about numbers and percentages or counts and the average or the mean. I think of data as any kind of information. It can be qualitative data, words, people's open-ended comments. Like I think of all of that information as data.
Can you share some of the common challenges you're seeing organizations facing when they're designing their surveys, and how can they overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I think then I always say I think the main one, but there are a few different ones. And I think you can really start at the very beginning, and it happens in that planning stage, right? So maybe one of the first challenges, a lot of folks don't think about the surveys or even the evaluation before they implement their training program or their education program or whatever kind of program it is. They kind of jump in and start the training, and then they think, oh, we should probably get some feedback about this. And then they try to design the evaluation plan in their instruments. So, and I know through the Kirkpatrick trainings that I've been through, that is a key, a key focus as well, is that you really need to start in those planning stages of the program, designing the evaluation. What kind of information do we need to collect? When are we going to collect it? Who are we going to collect it from? So knowing your audience, knowing your program objectives and outcomes, kind of the goals, you really need to know what's the focus of the program so we can then focus the evaluation and the surveys and the instruments on it. Also, I want to say, like, when I say surveys, I don't just mean paper surveys or electronic surveys. I think of surveys can also be interviews, focus groups. A lot of the advice that or the the recommendations, or when I talk about survey design, it can really apply to the interview questions or focus group questions or any other way you're interacting with your stakeholders, trying to gather their input and feedback.
Okay, so I do have a burning question.
Oh, I'm interested in hearing
this one is not on the list. I get this question a lot. Okay. Do I put on my Likert scale 4 options, 5 options, or 7?
Or 10? No.
Right. I mean, I think meaning 4 being, some people don't want to have like a neutral stance in the middle, right? But like, which is the best option?
Yeah. So I'm not going to avoid the question and say, it depends.
That's okay. I do it all the time.
But I mean, there is some context, and there could be some reasons where you might need more points on your scale than others. I think typically the research is pointing to like a 5 to 7 point scale. They still say, use an odd number choices so that the respondent has kind of a middle point. It doesn't necessarily have to be a neutral or I'm not sure, I don't know, but just somewhere so they can kind of land in the middle. And it does kind of, I will say it does depend on what are you hoping to get from this question, right? Like if you have a scale that's 10 points, you're not going to get a very accurate, my 7 might be different than your 7, your 7 might be more of a 5, mine's more of a 3, people really vary in their perceptions, especially when you make the scale that large. So kind of keeping the scale smaller can help you hopefully get a little more reliable, get more reliable results. So I don't know if I'm going to avoiding the answer totally, but
yeah. I mean, and I think a lot of organizations want to take the easy way out. And I mean this lovingly, friends. Because I also love a good template. I love a good starting point. I love not always reinventing the wheel. But what I'm hearing is if you really want to craft good data, good information to come out of your sources, you can start with a template, but it really still has to be customized to those outcomes, to, what is that level 4, right? What is that result that we're looking for? What is that endpoint? So it's not really like you can have one survey for everything, right? You have to really understand what your goals are.
right? The goals, the audience, and really each question on your survey or your instrument should have an intention and a purpose, right? So if you're asking a question and say you ask these same survey questions at every training you do, and you realize like we always ask them, if they like the temperature of the room. We're not changing the temperature of the room. It's set by facilities. We have no control over the thermostat. Let's just why are we at? That's a kind of a random example, but it's an example of folks, they ask some of the same questions because that's the way they've always done it. So maybe stop and focus on what are we trying to learn? What is it about our program that we want to make improvements, or modifications? What decisions do we need to make? And let's focus our questions, our instrument around that.
Did everybody hear that? I really hope you hear that, because so many times we see people determining what methods they're going to use based on tradition rather than on purpose. Okay, so be real clear. Anna's saying, and we would echo that you've got to determine what information do you need and how best to go about collecting that. Am I correct? And that's what you're saying.
Yeah. And just like I heard in my Kirkpatrick Silver certification, I think last week or the week before, you want to start with the end in mind, right? You want to kind of start with what are those longer term, the goals, the outcomes, the objectives. Start with that, and then you can focus your planning on instruments and methods and the data collection to really help get data that will drive decisions toward that purpose.
One thing I'd like to ask, and what we encourage people to do, is when they gather the information, a variety of different sources, if it's really mission critical kinds of things, we want to observe things, we want to talk to people, we want to use target surveys, interview, whatever. What we think people are not very good at is gathering the right people together to analyze, put it all out on the table, all the cards, all the information on the data, and analyze it and draw conclusions in order to make those intelligent decisions that need to be made, rather than just random decisions based on a smile sheet comment or something. Could you tell us your thoughts about analyzing it and then passing on those recommendations that are wise ones rather than random ones?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. I see this a lot, maybe in education, particularly higher education. We do surveys and we find out, from the instructors what they need, what they want, and then someone maybe in administration who's kind of outside the daily job of working with students and instructing them, they're making decisions on that data. But what you really need, you need those people that are in it. You need the instructors, professors, in this case, like to give their perspective on, why does the data show that? What could be the reasons behind that? What are the issues that could be driving the responses that we're seeing? Sometimes, like you said, you might have people that are kind of a step removed, even supervisors or CEOs, folks that maybe aren't involved in the day-to-day. They might not interpret the results the same as the people that gave you that feedback. There might be different intentions. So it's really important, kind of back in the planning stage, when you're identifying your stakeholders, those are the training participants, their coworkers, their supervisors, their bosses, their customers. You got to kind of look at the full net, and you can kind of put them in separate little boxes and say, okay, what do we need to learn from these folks, and how can these people help? I'm going to use the magic word that you can't talk about surveys without, but triangulate the results, right? So how can we kind of learn from this group, and what other data can we collect to help us kind of figure out what's going on with that, right? So if everyone is saying the room is too cold, what other data can we look at, right? Can we go and check the thermostat each hour and record that? And that, that's a non-academic example, but, trying to look at kind of what other sources can help corroborate the evidence that we're collecting.
If I didn't know better, and I think I do know better, I'm just messing with it here. It seems like the traditional ADDIE model may not be consistent with what you're talking about there with the E at the end.
Maybe it depends on how you interpret Addie.
Do it for us. Interpret it for us.
I have always looked at Addie as a kind of a continuous cycle. So that E at the end for me isn't the end of Addie, right? The E is really just the beginning, because then we're evaluating where we want that continuous improvement, right? And so to get continuous improvement, we need continuous feedback. We need to always be kind of evaluating our objectives, our goals, collecting, looking at all the different sources that we have for data, all our different stakeholders. So yeah, it's to me that evaluation piece it goes across all the different phases, right? It starts in the planning, design, development, implementation. Yeah.
That's really good. And I hear people talk a lot about continuous improvement. Okay, and I'm all for that. But unfortunately, what they're using is sporadic evaluation. When they do a test afterwards and survey afterwards, and then 30 days and 90 days. I don't know how you can make continuous improvement unless you are continuously evaluating. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that can be hard, particularly in education or in fields where, say, you offer this training every 6 months. So if you offer the training, it lasts, say, 2 weeks. You do surveys, you collect data, you're have all this great feedback from the participants and all the other stakeholders. So you want to implement changes. A few months later, you run the training again, you implement some of those changes, then you evaluate. Now it's, it can be almost a year later.
Yeah.
Before you're looking to see, did those changes that I made, what impact did they have? Were they effective? Were they good decisions? Are they driving us toward, the results we were hoping to see? Which is, and to your point, that's why it's really important to do the evaluation plan so that you can focus on before the program runs, before the training is implemented, during, at the different phases during your training, immediately after, collecting at all those different time points. It can help with some of that, but also working with your stakeholders, getting feedback on, I think, what I don't see often too is, we gather these results, we draw conclusions, we make recommendations, we've got an action plan. We need to take that action plan in many cases and go and talk to the stakeholders, the people, the participants that this will actually impact.
That's
right?
great.
Hey guys, we were thinking about changing this topic on day 2 of the training. Did that make sense? Is that something you actually do on the job? Would this help you? So involving all those key people is really important.
I like to hear a professor saying, quote, "Does that make sense?" It's a good blend that you have.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you shared there as well with the, going back and asking. I would like people to remember that the people taking this training, they're people, they're humans. And so could you tell the training team that they're humans? And so I kind of sat back and I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And in the explanation, it was the fact that these things are changing, but no one's going back to the participants and saying, is this okay? Does this actually meet the needs of what it is that you're doing? So I think that is so powerful to do. And truly helps us, we go down a path, well-intentioned, thinking that we're doing the right thing, thinking that we're making the right decisions. And then all of a sudden you're down the planning path, it's launched, and you realize that isn't even what they needed. And so now feel like you're back at square one, or you're almost like on the hamster wheel, right? You're just like round and round, spinning the wheels, keep redesigning and doing all the things. So I really appreciate what you're sharing there.
Yeah. And that also, as you were saying that, it made me think too, the advice I often give is try to include those stakeholders as you're designing your survey instruments, your focus group questions, your interview questions. Involve the people that are there, right? Because you might ask the question in a certain way, and they may have a totally different interpretation than what you intended. So including them in, a small, it doesn't, not everyone, it can be a small kind of representative sample of the group, and asking them, like, if I ask the question like this, am I going to get the answer I'm looking for? Or not the answer, but am I getting, is my point coming across the way I intended it to?
Mhm.
I have a feeling you picked up a few goodies from going through bronze and silver, but I also suspect that this is how you have been thinking long ago, because we refer to it as like the A and the Addy model, or trying to build these relationships. We're not just going to senior leaders and say, what keeps you up at night, and what objectives are you looking for, what outcomes? Thank you very much. We'll let you know how it went. We use the word recruiting, that we are recruiting them to be part of the whole process, as you're saying, recruiting the line managers and supervisors to be part of the level 3 process, and recruiting senior leaders to be part of that, where we talk about having them sign on to the mission critical programs, not sign off by here's the money. And we also talk about them being champions of what's working, challenging those that are struggling, removing barriers. So I'm really just so pleased how closely in alignment you are, and how practical you are, along with your great clinical expertise. That is such an opportunity for organizations to really take advantage of that.
Yep. Yeah. And then that kind of reminds me, I get the question a lot is, I can't get them to respond to my survey, or no one will sit down for the interview with me. And it's about getting that buy-in, right? So when I was doing outcomes assessment, working with faculty, trying to, collect their assessment data and having them review the data with me, a lot of them are hesitant, right? They're like, I don't want to share my test results. If all my students did really poorly, you're going to think I'm a bad teacher. But having them involved in those conversations, well, no, this is why we're doing the evaluation. We want to gather the data so that we can make improvements. This is your chance to ask for those resources that you need and get the data as evidence to help support our recommendations. So that buy-in, like you said, including them in the conversations and as champions is really key.
I had someone the other day call me and kind of chew me out about level 3. They said, well, we did what you said. We're sending out surveys, and we're just getting, to the supervisors and the graduates, and we're getting very little in response. In fact, we're just getting a lot of hate mail. I said, well, like, what do you mean? Said several of the supervisors saying, we don't even know who you are. Who do you think you are to be asking us to take our time to fill out these surveys when none of you have ever come and spent time getting to know us? So I think that, and they kind of talked themselves in a circle. They weren't really mad at me afterwards. They kind of said, well, maybe we could do it better. I said, yeah, maybe you can. Let me know how it goes.
You didn't want to throw yourself into that ring.
No.
That one other thing that when you mentioned that, you will often see, getting anyone to respond to surveys can sometimes be a challenge, especially if they don't see the value in it. So like you said, including them in the conversation, helping folks see like what we're going to do with your results can really make a difference. So.
I have one last question, then Vanessa will let you go where you want. But what are your thoughts of, like, I read a PR for a survey company that says we have 7 million benchmarks on our questions. But benchmarks across the different industries, as opposed to benchmarking one's own organization. Just thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this kind of goes back to understanding the purpose of your program. If it's a training program, going back to your organization's goals and objectives. How does this program fit in? And then what is it about it that we need to gather evidence, gather data for, right? So tying it, again, being purposeful and intentional.
You keep going back to that, don't you?
Yeah.
You keep going
We
back.
love that.
We do.
We do love that. That should be, you know what, if we had like our own unwritten but written core values, right? Like we said, Jim, about, was it the CIA? It is purposeful and having intention behind everything that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also, if you keep that that, I don't know, call it a mantra, but if you keep that in mind as you're designing and working with folks as they're designing their instruments, it can help focus the conversation, right? Like, oh, okay, it's a good question, but why are we putting it on this survey? Like, what is it that they're going to tell us about this that then we can use? What decisions is this going to drive, right? So I think it does help. It helps those conversations when you're designing your instruments.
Mm. So you mentioned earlier a few, kind of tools or the abilities now that you have to do more of this formative evaluation, right? So my understanding based on what you said was that, in the past, it was maybe a little bit more difficult to do formative evaluation, but technology has really enabled us to gather it more quickly. Are there any other tools or innovations you see people that are using that are working well for them?
Yeah. So as a professor, it used to, I'd say if you asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said that AI, artificial intelligence, these tools like Chat GPT and others they're ruining education. They're making my job crazy because, students would turn in work and I would look and I would say, this was obviously, when I have 5 students all turning in kind of the same structured responses. I'm like, somebody's using Chat GPT. But I will say in the last year, I have kind of turned that around for myself. And I actually use it now when I need a start, like a start. I can go to Chat GPT and say, give me 5 different ways to ask if, how engaged they felt their training was in, a food safety training program. And Chat GPT will be like, oh, you could ask this, or this, or this, or that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Like you can't you can't trust 100%. You can't trust what you're getting. I think hopefully if you've played around with it, you've learned that it's not always, it's not always accurate. You do have to kind of have some of your own knowledge to say, I'm not sure anybody would want to ask a question that way, but it does help you kind of get things started. So I think there are AI tools that can certainly help in designing your instruments. There's certainly AI tools that could help in designing your training programs, right? Like, helping you clarify metrics, how can we measure certain goals and objectives? So I'm learning the more and more I play with those AI tools. You also kind of learn there's an art to putting in how you ask the questions. I think it's called prompt engineering. And there is an art to that because you can ask certain ways and get certainly very different answers depending on how you do it. But I do see, I think AI can really be like an assistant, help us in
Hey, Vanessa, would you mind just giving your brilliant 2 minute or whatever it is on AI and what AI can do coupled with the genuine relationships?
Oh, yeah. You know me, I love my robot friend.
Right.
And exactly how you're saying it, right? We use it typically as our jump off point, right? It's the brainstorming, it's that first draft, right? I'll use it sometimes to develop learning objectives. And I'm like, I'm not even going to worry about blooms right now. I'm just going to throw in crap and like, make this sound better. So that way, because that's just the way my mind is working in that moment. But you still need the human behind it, right? At the end of the day, the robot is still a robot. It's still a technology. So it does not have the empathy and the understanding of tonality and all of those sorts of things, understanding nuance, to be able to really, do the best job. It is a way to save time, but it is not the end all be all that I think people are thinking that it's going to be and afraid of it. So it's not that the AI is going to take over your job. Someone that understands how to use AI is who's going to take your job. And that's where it's different because now they're saving time. I'm now able to go spend time talking to people. I'm able to now spend more time really analyzing the results And I'm able to point out, oh, the AI got a little biased there. The AI got this wrong here, and help to shift, because really bad decisions can be made if a human never actually looks at what comes out from AI. We've almost fallen into that trap where we're just like, I think this looks good. And then you actually really dive into it and you realize, ooh, that we would have made a really bad decision if we did not really verify.
Vanessa, that was extra good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
It
Thank
was.
you.
Yeah.
This was, I mean, I know Jim at first was a little nervous to talk about the survey and the numbers, but I thought that this was quite an amazing podcast and just made me even more excited for the summit. So can you tell us more about your session for the summit and what we could expect?
Yes. So my plan for the summit, I really want to focus on the finer details. So what we didn't get into today was what makes a question a good question, what makes it a bad question, right? What are biased questions? What are leading questions? The whole, we didn't even get into really reliability and validity. How can we design effective instruments, that can help us get to valid and reliable conclusions. So all of that, but also just more examples. I've found typically in sessions that folks can really learn better when they see examples that are applicable to them, right? That they can relate to. So that's what I'm hoping to bring, kind of more specifics and details about question wording, response wording, mixing qualitative and quantitative methods, how that works, how you could, triangulation will certainly come up, but also kind of focusing on those key concepts in that planning phase that we did talk about in the bronze and silver Kirkpatrick certification, focusing on really understanding what is the program, what are the goals and objectives, why are we evaluating it, what are the goals and objectives for the evaluation, and then what are the metrics, just kind of walking through who's the audience, who are the stakeholders. Like, we'll walk through all of those key steps that can really help form a more effective evaluation instrument. So
amazing, because those were all burning questions I had, but I was like, let me save some of the goods for the summit. So make sure you all grab your ticket. If you are watching this before, I think May, we still have early bird pricing. So, make sure you grab that ticket. It's going to be chef's kiss. And really what people want to talk about, right? They really just want to know, how do I actually implement this model? How do I actually create a good survey? So I'm getting good information, and Anna is here to help us with all of that. Anna, where can our listeners connect with you?
I am on LinkedIn, and they can certainly message me through LinkedIn. Email is great, and you can find me at the summit. I will be there. I'll be there all 3 days. And eager to meet folks, and then really an event like the summit really helps me connect with the field, kind of hear what are the challenges, current challenges, especially with the latest technology and AI, and really getting to talk to organizations that are in it and going through it is really helpful for my professional work, because it kind of can help me focus my research, figure out, trying to give folks what they want or need. So an event like the summit, being face to face and having these conversations and networking is great.
Well, Anna, I tip my hat to you.
I was wondering what you were grabbing back there. I love his prop drawer.
I was saving it for a special time.
It has not come out yet. I have not even earned the right. So
you're getting real close, though. You're real close. You have.
All right, y'all. We are so excited for this summit, so excited for this conversation. Let us know what you took away and what particular tips and tricks you're going to be implementing in your next data collection, survey, interview focus group. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the podcast, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks, y'all.